a very exciting night. I am so pleased and so honored to be introducing Rachel Blau DuPlessis, who is giving this year's Duffy Lectures and Reading for the Department of English here at Notre Dame. This is a wonderful tradition that we do to commemorate a really grand raconteur from our department who has worked with many of the current professors. We're pleased to remember him tonight with some raconteurism of our own, if you will. Are you ready? And now I'll begin. So I'm Joyelle McSweeney from the Department of English and the Program in Creative Writing, and I see lots of faces here who belong to one affiliation or the other, and I'm pleased that we're all here together tonight to celebrate Rachel Blau DuPlessis. It is somewhat intimidating to introduce a poet critic who describes her own work so very aptly and whose own work is constantly in the process of sort of describing and reinscribing itself, but I will do my best. In the preface to Surge, which is the new volume, and that's the volume that concludes but does not close the 26-year project of drafts, DuPlessis has this to say about her work. She writes, "Drafts has made a structure where you cannot say which text has priority, that is, which text glosses and which text states, which is the original and which is the elaboration." She goes on, "So it is an anti-totalizing text in a situation with totalizing temptations, an anti-high modernist text with a modernist modernity and its long, lively aftermath. Drafts is a work that as a whole ruptures the binaries that might contain it, and it is something unbinarist." That's just like a paragraph and a half on one page of the preface to a really exciting and challenging book. So it's full of ideas, and it's a little intimidating to try to go there and say my own remarks about it. But I would say that in addition to being modernist and its discontents, Drafts is quite simply not simple, but it is a marvelous text. I wrote it's a marvelous text, so maybe it's a marvelous text, continually forming and reforming itself, even as it reveals the marvel of its gridded, entirely odd 114 sections. Surge alone contains, Surge alone, like the latest part of Drafts, contains a vital inflorescence of forms, an index, a poetic preface, which is more like an alchemical recipe, a canzone, a litany, a ballad and gloss, a newspaper, and a rubric are all just some of what you'll find in the latest batch of drafts. Indeed, I would say that what you most of all encounter in this text is a vivaciousness and a vitality, like an intellectual vitality, and that's embodied for me by the signature color red, which appears quite a bit in this book, and especially in one of the earliest poems in the book is called Rubric, which, as we learned today in my class, has the word for red. A redness is concealed etymologically in the word rubric, and it's a signal color that calls our attention to bear. I'd like to read just a little bit from Rubric to show you the sort of lively passion, the intellectual and aesthetic passion that try to be in the same space in this book and create a kind of buckling. It's almost Gerard Manley Hopkins-like in this poem, I think. So at any rate, here's one stanza. "Oh, dizziness, there's no rest here. At the heart of the delectable comes floating. At a border of the debatable comes zoning. At delight, whitening mists for turns of anxiousness. The blur of a car, is this the road? Is this the moment? Is this poisonous? Is this the premise, the promise, the prefix so broken and yet still marked by streaks of light? Where is this, and what are we?" So any small, tiny part of this book I read you, it's like so rich, right? It could open up in any number of fractaling directions, and that's really the pleasure of finding yourself anywhere in Rachel Blau DuPlessis' work. And this is the vivacity of mind in a space of pure form, but as form is not pure for long, because it's filled up with intellectual passion and the lubriciousness of language itself. And language wants to link into new syntaxes. It wants to sprout new proximate ideas and see how they bear up or whether they fall apart and generate new ideas. This is what I'm calling the vitality and the vivaciousness and the excitement of reading these poems and the entire body of work. Rachel Blau DuPlessis is a very celebrated critic and poet. one who celebrates, not with praise, but with an attention which is itself a kind of adornment of the texts and ideas that she trains her marvelous attention on. Marvelist. She's a marvelist. Her critical work is obviously one of generating landmarks. It is a landmark body of work, and including landmark works on Appen and HD, as well as iconic works of sort of reframing the way that we think about literature. So, for example, Blue Studios, with poetry and its cultural work, The Pink Guitar, Writing as a Feminist Practice, and Purple Passages, which takes a good hard look at Pound, Eliot, Zukowsky, Olsen, Creeley, and the ends of patriarchal poetry, as well as all the books of drafts and numerous other substantial projects, which, thanks to the awesomeness of the bookstore, are right on your doorstep right now, and you should pick them up and pay for them. If you have any money, let's see, it's pretty early in the month, you might have some money. I hope I have characterized for you the excitement that I find in this body of work, which is a wonderful body, a body with no designated head or tail, but it's all of it head and all of it tail. It's an exciting body to interact with. Her passion is very various. Her delight is palpable and generative and alive, and she is a delight. I don't know if many of you actually have had a chance to hear her or meet her in the last few days. This is a real contact high, I think. Are you allowed to say that at Notre Dame? I don't know. Innocent, sinless contact high. And in closing, and I will hand the mic to her so that we may hear her voice and hear her wonderful poems lock and unlock. I would like to praise her with my highest praise, which she may find dubious. But I would like to praise her with my favorite quote from another monumental author and critic, albeit one from a lost and Lemurian epoch, and that's Walter Pater. His quote, "To burn always with this hard gem-like flame, to maintain this ecstasy is success in life." So I give you the very successful Rachel Blau DuPlessis.
After such knowledge, what forgiveness? Wow, who is this person? It's kind of the question. I don't know which mic to use. In some ways, this gives me more reverb, and so I'd like to use this, but I have this. And is that overkill? Well, given that introduction, I should probably have a third mic or something. That was a wonderful introduction, and I'm very grateful to you, Joyelle, and to the people who invited me here, my friends, or my already friends from here, and the people whom I've met here, who have been very kind, very hospitable, and very smart. So it's been altogether a great pleasure. You're lucky in Notre Dame in a lot of ways, so enjoy it, and be happy in the privilege that you have in being here. And I mean that in terms of the library and the faculty. Other things we can pass over in silence. Here's the deal. Drafts actually completed itself after 26 years, and it's really a remarkable thing for me that had happened. It's hard to even give the feeling of it. When I was talking to Joyelle's class today, it's clear that some of the people in the class were not even 26. And here's this person who spent 26 years, clearly of some sentient life, writing a poem. So it's hard to kind of bridge that, communicate that. But I have a kind of plan, and the plan is always heuristic, it's always invented. So drafts sort of it folded up, but it didn't end. It completed, but it did not finish. And subsequently, I've actually written a couple of books of poems. That's in a year or so. One of which is called Interstices. And Interstices is letters as if to letters of the alphabet, and ledgers, meaning kind of journals, that idea. Letters and ledgers, 26 of each, because there are 26 letters in the English alphabet. So I'm going to read a few of those with the advantage to the people where it's hard to sit and listen to a long poem right off the bat in a reading. I'm going to read those because they're more introductory. This book, I'm happy to say, is going to be published by Sub Press Collective very, very soon. So that's neat. There's no particular order. So you'll hear that I'm going to do them almost in reverse numerical order. What can I say? No excuse. So they're mostly, I think I'm reading mostly letters. And there are 3 of them. Letter 8. Dear Y, I saw your letter written in the sky. 5 blue outlined, white filled, narrow strikes of Y as if lightning nailed down among the thickening clouds. They presaged an immediate storm that the folks in the dream who lived there and knew called fury. A fierce rain then, and then an inch thick stun of ice. Can you see this as I describe it? Is it the feelings that are lacking? Who can identify and state the uneasy, twinkling shifts of feeling in a dream? And in the aftermath, to haul words through this portage, schlepping over land, and in which land? Distrusted, splintery words. It is the aura of the human, and it makes one rage and weep surprised until all dry of tears. Alphabetic days, words, always more than half inadequate. Cannot even fully tell a graphic, well-formed dream. How not to think culture, signage, skill sets, capacities for mythography are inadequate. I mean, by being always incomplete. We cannot acknowledge, articulate, or even see intimations of the real webs and layers of complexity. All will forever exceed language. Will exceed our understanding, therefore. The stressed bees in the lavender, the pollen of stars are worlds so wide and worlds so far, one sinks in rage for words and awe. This is a system-generated message. Please do not bother to respond. Replies to this message are neither monitored nor answered. Letter 7. Dear B, I want the interstices, spatter lines, sketch lines, and cryptograms acting in and on an endless, vast excess. A splintered apparatus, babble left in rubble, a map of seams as large as the remains. Some few guttural utterances stumbled onto alphabets and into other tricky systems, shifting numbers to words or words to numbers. Every statement made a coded multiple of itself. Merz, Schmerz. It's German. Not trying for gematria. I just can't stop counting. In the chamber of the syllable, glyphs of signage rule. Dear G, dear J, dear L, dear D, dear F, dear N, dear S, dear K, dear P, dear R, dear T, dear C, dear H, dear A, dear E, and dear B. Excesses of letters, cf. the above, have been our joy. We have lit up with yearning to receive these gifts. We tried to mean what we tried to say, but it's the language itself that complicates. So actually, the thing is always to be outrageous, ferocious, degenerate, and indebted. Let me drink some water, which is always a great act to perform in front of 100 people. Letter 6. Dear Jay, this really is a comic darkening of doubling shadows. I'm torn between suspicion and laughter. How do you feel? Turquoise allows individual power to surface, deflects hostile energy. Lapis lazuli, mental and spiritual cleanser, brings spiritual power, attracts etheric fluidium into physical. This list is for educational use only and is not intended to replace the services of a physician. I should hope not. What do you think work means in the phrase, "it does not work"? Baby, get real, you might say. What does it mean? There was an obituary the other day that counted the person's total minutes. General first world average is 34,790,757. Even coming in at over 34 million, it's a chilling account. It all adds up, but still, I'm afraid to calculate my stats. And someone said, I'd better live twice as long as anyone else because I'm doing things half as fast. How many former houses can I visit? How many old places can I ghost at once? How many keys have I lost their locks? How many little doggies wag their happy tails? I dreamed my 12-story workplace was entirely consumed in flame. I didn't actually think I had 12 stories, but that would be another story. Firemen ringing the bell could do nothing. Note, no persons or animals were harmed in the construction of this dream. It was that all my books were on discs inside the fire. Nothing is saved. Note, it's an earlier dream with an older, floppier technology. At the end, there is only structure, a grid of girders. One meaning of ledger is horizontal timber. Timbre, imagine that. I shrug in the dream and say, so? I could do it all or some of it again, but in a different way. Wow, talk about coping. There are dumps that scavengers dig through for anything usable. What is not spoiled? What is only half spoiled? Actually, it is all running away with me. Oh, and there's one more. Ledger 11. Plan. Take a book and soak in water down to pulp. Result, a loosening grip on the discourses. Plan. Here could write between the lines the things unsaid, a text within the text. Result, blue paradox goods of raven rose, magenta, canopic crypts within the sentenced word. Plan, override those claims of illegible dots. Result, stintless stars. Dickinson. Plan, stack languages translating from one to another. Result, parallels between knowledge and mystery. Question, does a sentence have a final wish? No. The cleft radiates luminosity. Complete is never complete. So those are works from the newer writing. I always worry whether I've forgotten to say something about it, but I guess I sort of covered the territory. And now what I would like to do is sort of treat this as a launch for Surge. It is a miracle that the bookstore has a book. John and I, Salt Publishers, which is a wonderful publisher that produces very lovely books, also has a quite ambivalent relationship to distribution. This is obviously an in-joke, granted, who has been giggling, but it is really, if you want this book, you damn well better buy it now because you'll never see it in any bookstore known to man, okay, or woman. So I'm not kidding you. This is not an advertisement. And so, seriously, support SALT as any way you can. Give John a penny. Anyway, this is actually, I love that they did covers that I had designed. I mean, there's all sorts of things that are good about them, but distribution is actually not one of them. Now, there aren't any bookstores in America either, which is another long conversation. At any rate, what I'd like to do is read 4 poems, but actually 3 poems and part of 1 poem in this book. And the first one I'd like to read is called One on One. And I think sometimes I have things to say, so let me check. I don't think that there's anything inexplicable about this, except draft 102 is called One on One. There's something that's interesting to me about that. It's on page 59, John. Okay. Happy birthday, contingency. Your troth I bind and bid, I brood and bide. Mouth and eye, moth and cup, double fault with precarious vessels, earthly phosphorescence with its purposes, a surtute of baggage in the garden of Muth. Happened how? What just occurred? Detraining, I go back for her luggage. Whose? Over drams with snow, barriers with wire networks with the strings and cold led through houses and families. I had to drag and dredge, remembering and forgetting, beginning and losing, backwards and forwards. Even almost never when, and then whenever almost odd. That leggy girl self, coming vaguely into focus, shakes unsteadily, tripping on purling atoms of unevenness. So call her or me. There was a second or third beside her, wandering in cadence, a familiar visitations, with a hollow ring of bone about the bone. One heard hoarse snufflings of a working family, pulling, grazing, nuzzling, lumbering. Saw Rachel of the long durée, she of the shadow poems, writing a name for a day and writing of no name. Saw a sweet dog peeing anything to wet and soften as if in a dream. What dramas did these characters propel? What toil of tide? What surge of fate? What bespoke selvage? What diva borderlands? It was maybe simpler. Someone here or there took and claimed an idiosyncratismic way, very much like this aspired to. Handsome and tall as you, girl, that other she was also. He was, they were, and we, new pronouns, new others, further questioners, and other further ones again. Parallel lurches, what do you want of me? I said, and thereupon lurched with them, stumbling each to ouch, all into all, us soon as singing from discrepant scores, 5 tunes, 4 meters, 3 keys, 2 full orchestras, and 1 gold ring, mixolydian. And other lurchers test the rocky site, the moor, the furs, il campo, champ, the itchy grass, the plain or boggy seep, in short, whatever place abutted up against the apparently impassable mountain range that one began with. History has no telos, it turns out, just various skirmishes. Make sure children do not die of the preventable. Assure enough clean water, nourishing snacks, get everyone reasonably settled here or along the way, and consider whether it is wise to kill. Then, maybe, reading. Even this was difficult enough and kept on devolving. So who among the lurchers found that crotch of yes to catch? The why that had been made so tempting, hook of the world, the astonishing world, trawling softly through the stream that never stops its flow. Why does it matter who? It's someone did, more than one, and one again. For this is another now, despite the plays and travels already elaborated. This clearly still unfolding, despite magisterial stagings, this still indeterminate, still ready. Hypnagogic during all transitions, hyper during the cacophonies and stompings to which I lent a wobbling mezzo and a wiggling foot. I kept losing my exact place around the rests, but who cares? Error is obviously the muse of this, not eros, not erato, but error, compounding error, venturesome and ecstatic on a backdrop of enormous fullness, in which there is one small dot, if you can find it, that contains everything possible to know, or so it is poetic to declare, but compacted into a single explosive incipience. Of working out the postulated syntax of that dot, I, she, we, they, and you did speak. Of being in this oddest world, of being a register of receptivity and compulsion, of passion. These several fractalizing sets of forces ended wrapped together, one on one or another, the arc of one's life with mobile pairs and clumps of this and that. All sought to manifest fervor by any hold that flesh and light could twist. All found that they were two ends of the same rope, wrestling with awe at what they touched, themselves, locked into, snarled up, roused beyond power and by seeking it, or seeking to be overcome by contact and by searing, or severing and yearning to be joined, or cut and torn and marked by bone ripped from the silvery dome of cartilage. There'll be a song, a sprong, a nub or turn or twist will serve as seed and pulse and thrust. Neither dance nor sweet melodies, but only stun, a burning one-on-one, the pleasure that happens with ruthless happiness as end and entering it. That was draft 102, one-on-one. And it's a longish one. They range, these long poems range. So that was patient of you. The next one I'd like to read is called Draft 106, it's words. And this has a little bit of a gloss. At the beginning of this poem, there's a word square, and at the end of the poem, there's a word square. I don't know, you probably can figure out what a word square is, sort of random words in a square. And then the other thing that, there's stuff that's very interesting about paratext and manuscript and the bibliographic. So I don't know whether you've ever seen a web version of Emily Dickinson, but Emily Dickinson, when she's edited, Emily Dickinson occasionally put alternative words for her words, which is, it just wipes you out. It's really interesting. And when she was edited, the editor, who's Thomas Johnson, put a little and mark, like cross, And then you look down at the bottom of the page and there's another word that Emily Dickinson chose. So this has fascinated me for many years, and this poem has other words in it, and it's called Words. So I'm going to gesture like this with my hand, with the mic. I don't know how, it's like I need another hand, to indicate when there's an alternative word for some of the words. Draft 106, Words. Swerve, swerve, but not as much as atoms. The main thing we have in common is restlessness. Things do hold together, and so does meaning, more or less. Glyphs, Morse, pebbles, visionary, long, happenstance, sing-song, interlock, other, obdurate, something, memory, really, but also diagnosis, ungainliness, what, never, barely, shards, thank you, haunted, between and or, trace, deeper, equally, weir, of, midst, leaf, syntax, constitute, unpick, falsifies, bumpy. Signs under impingement, great lists, grids of seasons, days, swirling, davening, far beyond vagaries, and open 24 hours, intermittently. The main word we have in common is hap. There's a clacking sound, a weedy ditch, a pre-war map. Words are blacked out, or they evoke inarticulate things, or they stick in your gut unsayable. Something's coming loose. There is scattering, and the snap out of blurriness. There is brightness too, and no genre enough for it, even for its sudden shifting, even for its affect, impact. And there are words that become tremendous mantras, doing field work in ordinary language, inventing what when found needed to be said, and they reverberate, pontificate for a long, long time. The words establish no exact centers, with some words inside intangible centers, so words declare the variable as such, permanent. Open what omens that can never be scried dependably. This also gives rise to resonance, reciprocity. Low ostinato enfolded in itself gets excited by, extruded from, its own vibratos of implication, structurally errata, generically mixed, enjoyably the noise of clumps, seriously negation. Plus whole lives of ands inside the work, the unintelligible. Await openings within the outflung surge of cosmic time. Another word we have in common is sidereal. So that the whole universe and every sociable part of it pulses semi-translatable messages, maybe in words, maybe words being part of that. One imagines tintinnabulations, but here's only the rumble of materials where, given, everything equals being. Begin, even what seems to not. The unknown in exfoliation, federation. It is changing as it speaks. We speak. It is not totally our language, but it is, we are, speaking word to word, correlating overlaps of syntaxes. Words matter. Things are discussable. We cannot not think so. Alternative is unthinkable, or worse still, thinkable it is. Suppose words do not matter. Then would we stop making them? And as best we can? No. The motivation? A wager so precise it makes Pascal's look petty. Let it all in. Fissure, fracture, and broken shard, let the mobile in. Leap into this excess ripe and snide, the compost thick with overlays of conjunction, and leap. Is it the same leap? Consider the question later. Into one or another void. How? I'm glad you asked. Like fairy tales, the poem demands the collection of tasks. Unlike them, you cannot count on threes. Gather and respect the endless ordinal rips and appreciate the keening microtones in empathy with dark news read in the darkness. All of the above gives rise to vertigo, and the poem is energized, enlarged by that. Might even postulate other intelligences, inferences, half-baked like us, capable of belated reconstructions, reconsiderations. Might postulate occurrences parallel to this from modes, moans, of similarly intent witness. Not epigrams with a twist of rhyme, nor lyrics soaring, solemn, soundings, finally, portage, creased, thus, what, there, fragments, did, evident, long, at least, I, but, multiple, oh, stubborn, besides, existed, can't, as if, and, out, joists, whatever, sign, rubble, project, how, telling, exigent, tangle, boundaries, shatters, it, blanked out space, anything turned. And at 4:32 exactly, the wind that's blowing fiercely hits such down swoops as a short-eared owl is like a night train with that long time far away who. Nothing is stranger than life, except maybe languages. With words, the world is more than is the case. How could it not be just that way? That was draft 106 words. And I think it does depend on what Wittgenstein meant by the case. We can discuss that later. But I think if he means what I think he means, it's not right.